So today we're going to be doing design review. So Janil and I, we have a bunch of links loaded up. These are people who have worked on an assignment in the 10K designers cohort. We're going to be reviewing their designs. We're going to be talking about what we liked about it, what we disliked about it, and we have a very interesting rating system. Here's our rating scale. So Janil, I'm assuming you like Bhel. Our scale, our rating that we're going to be using for these, we're going to be using the Bhel scale. What the Bhel scale is, a 0 to 5 rating on how well this design works with all of these elements together. The way the files have been arranged, the attention to detail, the UI elements have been placed. All of these things together come in a holistic way, in the same way that with Bhel, you've got the onion, you've got all the different fresh ingredients, the salty ingredients coming together in this nice package. This rating is a holistic rating for this. So on the Bhel scale,
let's do it, man.
The first design here, this is by Ajay Krishnan. Now, Ajay has made this app for booking home cuisines, right? So home cuisine, delivery, you can kind of do that. Let's just go through this. As you can see, there's already actually a couple rounds of feedback here already from our mentors. But Janil, your thoughts?
I think the first thing that comes to mind for me is, when he's got the screen where you have to enter your phone number. So I think he's just looking at that, and I like that he's actually got the states in there. So in the first screen, if you look at it, it says enter your phone number, and then the button is disabled. So he's actually thought about the state that, hey, we haven't entered the button, so let me disable that. And in the next screen, he's got the button enabled. So I think that thoughtfulness is really good.
Definitely. One note I'll add here for everybody is in this scene, you can very clearly see that this is designed for iOS. However, this keyboard here is an Android keyboard. So just something to keep in mind with your system elements, you want it to feel as real as possible. Beyond that, of course, we're not going to be giving exhaustive feedback. We want to talk about some highlights of things that stood out to us. I'll just say a few more here. This is an app for India, so we can pretty much assume it's +91. But in the case you are designing for an international app, it might be a good idea to let that be editable. So we've seen certain apps, they put a flag along with a country code there, which you can actually get into and edit. A very interesting thing that happens here is I was speaking to actually somebody who was living in India but was originally from the US, and they said that I actually don't use certain apps because they do not allow me to sign up with the US. I don't use a bunch of Indian apps because my US number doesn't work. So this is just something to note. Even though it might be completely in India, you will have tourists. You will have people who have international numbers who should be able to probably use the app.
And I think if you go in the home screen and if you zoom in on the first one, I think the main thing that's not exactly, clear is that you've got the location there and then he's got the search. So the location part is already pre-selected, like at the top. There's the small geolocation icon, and then right next to it is a small drop down. So it's not exactly clear that how do I change this location, because when you're looking at all this, when I close my eyes and literally open that right away, the first thing that pops out is the search bar and then all the results below that. So if I'm like, but hey, I think I moved to a different address. So either it uses my location, or if I want to manually force it to change, there needs to be a better way except that small chevron or the drop down.
The way I think about something like this would be in terms of frequency. So changing location is probably low frequency. And if they do, it's probably for something like home versus office deliveries. So personally, I would keep this, but a note to Ajay would be you probably, as part of your onboarding, here we go. So this is how you probably add an address, and then it stays there. Jenny, do you have a suggestion for how we could improve this?
I think my thing would be, instead of to make it more accessible, instead of just having that small, chevron drop down, I would just include the smaller text word, maybe change or something. Just at the top of my head. Cool. So this way it's very clear that, okay, you go here and you click that change text and that's how it changes it.
Got it.
That would be the only thing. Because on your phone, this thing is going to be extremely small. And to touch it with that precision is going to be even harder with your finger.
Definitely. A few more things here. When working with data, so here you've got a name, and what Ajay has done is he's put all of this stuff in the same line. So the tricky part here is you might have a scenario where names are much longer. So in the case of this being a much longer name, like let's say Anthony Thomas Zachariah, maybe that's his full name.
Yeah.
This would kind of go off the screen, or you would have to kind of truncate that name, and that might not look great. So in this scenario, I always suggest looking at your element width. 4.85, this should probably be on its own line, just so that the name gets a little bit more room to breathe.
Dude, one of my buddies' name is really long. I think it's something like Subramaniam Heber Ravindran. So it's like really long. And if you have that here, it's gonna like warp to the next line or something, or just completely extend.
Yep. On that note, I will say that a good thing that Ajay has done is he's used real names. I see a lot of people sometimes just say name, like they'll just say name, or they'll say lorem ipsum, or they'll say name McName face, or like a fake name, right? I think it's always a great idea to use real names, real photos, real data, because doing that helps you think about these edge cases of what happens when there is a longer name, what happens when the profile picture maybe is not so good. These cases of how the information will finally look in your UI, definitely worth thinking about.
And even just the different images. Like, I cannot tell you how many times I've seen case studies where it's like the same photo, copy and paste it 100 times. So then it doesn't really give that liveliness of like, oh, this is like an actual, like a close to a real app. So in this one, you can see that he's used like 3-4 different images to really bring that contrast.
So Ajay, the rest of it, you have feedback from Dawar over here. Dawar, by the way, is the head of design at Dukaan. I guess he is Ajay's assigned mentor for this. Definitely, I would suggest working on this feedback. Where do you rate this, Janil, and why?
I think I'll give it a 3.5 on the Bhel scale. I think there's a lot of stuff he's done, and I think some of the updates he made, and there's like feedback from the mentors. I think once he implements that, I can definitely see him going from a 3.5 to like a 4.2 on the Bhel scale.
I would also give this a 3.5. I think all the elements are in place. He's got the structure. The file is arranged pretty neatly. He has thought about the main flows in the app. However, the points, the places where I deducted it would be things like this, just the attention to detail on system elements here, some of the considerations for these individual elements, as well as, I definitely think there is scope for improvement. Agree with your point. After implementing all of these changes suggested by the mentors, this can definitely be a 4 out of 5. So this one is called Tranquil Trails. This is by Sushma. And what she's made is an app for people to discover trails. Like you can actually book an upcoming hike along with a group, and you can kind of view this along with difficulty level, location, and a bunch of other details, right? So let's go through this.
Before we do that, question for you, Do you like hiking and going on trails?
I do. But I don't think I've done enough of it. Like right now, I would do it maybe a couple of times a year. I actually want to do it a lot more. Like I would want to do multiple every other month. But I've not.
I think I like the hikes and a little bit of it. But what I don't like, to be completely candid, is how those hikes are like going straight up, like mountain, like dangerous type of hikes, like really intense. I think that's just too much for me. Like just chill type of hike, I don't mind that.
Definitely. And on that note, one thing that immediately stood out to me is these illustrations. Now, I know that she has probably looked for illustrations from existing illustration kits, right? These are not really made individually by her. But then as a result of that, it does feel like there are style mismatches. Like this, for example, goes really well with this background here, right? I can see that color palette similarities. But then this one feels a little Toy Story Woody to me. Like the color palette has kind of changed. This one here, I didn't really like this text here, but then overall, I think the styles are too different across these screens. So I would definitely try to make modifications. In an ideal scenario, maybe you're already good at illustrations, or if you're working in a team, typically you will be working with somebody on your team who is a visual designer or an illustrator, and they might help you out with this. But here I might probably change that.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the best analogy for this attention to details is like the reason you go and you eat that bhel from the bhayaji is because you have the fresh ingredients. Like a few times when I'd ask the bhayaji, they would actually do it like wake up at 4 o'clock in the morning and prepare all the ingredients. They'll cut all the dhania and all these things in the morning. They'll get it fresh and they will prepare that and bring it with them in the stall, right? So if they just go and get the ready-made chutney, right, from MDH or someone like that, or MTR chutney put in the bhel, I mean, you're not paying money for that, right? So the same way, as a designer, you're expected to ensure that all these consistency, all these things happen so that the folks that are using the product don't have to feel that.
These are her visuals. Now, I definitely think the visual design could definitely use some more work. Some specific things that I will point out. Typically, when you have two call to actions on a page, I have observed just this pattern that one of them will be primary and one would be secondary. So this one, I might do a outline border rather than just a solid. But beyond that, I think some of the more serious issues were this text being too small in a bunch of places. Things like these, like this is not a great element. This right here, 4x4, is pretty much invisible if I were to actually see it on my screen. What I would like to see is for these to take up an entire list, right? So in terms of visuals, I definitely felt it lacking a little bit.
So let me ask you a question there, Abhinav. Let's say I'm still trying to improve my visual design, right? I'm not there yet. And if I know that, hey, you know what, my visual design is not that great yet. But there's this tendency that I have. Nahi, mujhe scratch se hi design karna hai. I got to design everything from scratch. What would you recommend there? Would you recommend to just maybe keep on going down that path? Or would you be like, you know what, just suck it up and actually for starting, use some kind of like really well designed UI kit as a starting point?
I would definitely suggest referencing a lot of UI kits. I feel like Sushma might have referenced some UI kit here, right? This was a wireframe kit that seems to be in her file. But again, choice matters here. So like even the one that she has picked, this is a web UI kit. So a lot of her elements, if you notice, do feel a little bit more like they would work on web, right? Like this here, I would probably not have a problem clicking this icon with my mouse, but with my finger, that doesn't work out. So a lot of these elements here do seem to be a little bit more web oriented. So it does feel a little bit more like a mobile web experience rather than an app. So I would definitely suggest finding higher quality references for your UI elements.
So this is very candidly, this is a case of like, Bhaiya ji, Bhel mein maza nahi aaya, वापस से और एक बार make like a fresh Bhel.
So overall, Janil, what's your rating? What's your Bhel scale? Where do you put this?
I would definitely say that she needs to go through another iteration. On the Bhel scale, I'll probably give this a 2.8 just because it needs another round of just feedback and implementation and just kind of going through it and polishing up a lot of things, especially in the visual design side of things. So that's going to be my rating. It's a little bit, I think the lowest one I've given so far. I feel a little bit sad about it, but
yeah. So Sushma, I think you've done an amazing job. And especially if this is your first app that you've ever made, it's amazing. Because I remember my first app, it was nowhere close to as good at this as this is. So you're definitely on the right path. You have implemented some of these changes that we talked about in one of the previous things. So good job on that. But I would rate this a 3 out of 5. So pretty close to Janil's rating. And I think those 2 points for improvement, one would be your visuals. I think you can definitely do a lot better. This is a great first attempt, but I'm very confident that the next app you design, you will be able to take a lot of these things and elevate the quality that you're designing at. And the second point that I would remove would probably be also just for visuals. Like a lot of these elements, it does feel a little old school to me. And maybe that is because of your references that you went through for visuals, or maybe that's just how it happened to turn out. But definitely great job on putting this together. Great job on the overall completion. It does feel like a complete app that you have designed. But do take a look at visuals and how you can get better at that.
And most importantly, Sushma and everyone watching this right now, you might feel discouraged when you see this. You're going to be like, oh my God, am I not good enough? Don't look at it that way. Just look at this as like a stepping stone, more of like an iteration. It's very hard that in your first try, when you're breaking into this field, that by default, you're going to have everything perfect. So don't get demotivated. We just want to push you all that are watching this to just level up your skills.
Definitely. In the end, we want the yummiest Bhel. We want the yummiest products from you. And for that, we're going to give you feedback at every single level. So this app is called Solemate. This is by Rachit. And what Rachit has worked on is a marketplace where you can find cleaners for your shoes. Now, to give you all some context, these shoes that we're talking about here, these are sneakers, and this is for the sneakerhead crowd. These are expensive, premium shoes, and this is almost the equivalent of getting your bike serviced, right? Because these shoes do cost a lot. So let's see what Rachit has done.
Can you zoom in on the title, the first screen itself? Man, I love that. I love that. That playfulness, the soulmate, how he's done with that. Oh my God.
Yeah, I love that too. One note here, this back button, I think it's because this is not really the home page. This is a part of a bigger app that he's kind of designing. This is specifically the care part of it. Overall, I really liked the visuals. I like the personality of it, Janil. Like,
very clean.
You immediately saw the yellow, bright yellow, and that kind of had that kind of reaction. I also love the typography, right? He's used Space Grotesque for this, and I think it does really create that nice brand. So love that.
By the way, you are a sneakerhead. Let me ask you, what is your favorite brand? Or do you have any specific favorite brand you usually go to?
So I definitely love the Yeezys. I recently bought one of the Yeezy slides. I also have some of the Yeezys. I don't remember which colorway it was, but I definitely have that. But I am not really. Oh, this is the one actually. I actually got one of these recently.
Wow.
Very comfortable, super nice. But that what I would say is my top favorite. I'm not really too much of a Jordan's fan.
Yeah.
One thing that I would definitely suggest Rachit to think about, and if you are working on an app that requires you to have trust, right, to build trust through design, think about how can you at each point of the journey reaffirm that this is something that you can trust, remove any doubts that they might have. In this case, this is definitely for high-end shoes. So one way Rachit has done that is through rating, right? So 1,000 ratings of 4.3, that makes me trust the fact that High and Dry, this studio, does a good job. But I would love to see if you can kind of keep that trust factor throughout the flow, all the way to a successful booking. So even right here, if you could really reassure me that, hey, we're not going to damage your shoes, where we actually have experience. If you could show me a little bit about how you do it, maybe use visuals, maybe use a 3-step process of this is how we do it. You have mentioned it here as text, but I think going heavy on the trust would definitely be a good idea.
And I think Airbnb does a really good job of it. Like they say that you have insurance on this. So, I mean, if you're hosting your place on Airbnb, you're kind of like, you feel that trust that something's like everything's going to be okay. Then they have a lot of this Airbnb inspections like that they highlight. So like these small things, like if you're like on the fence, like should I do this or not? It makes it very easy to make that final decision.
One thing that I like here is Rachit has not started with the login screen, and that is a good idea because it helps users directly get to the value of the app. So here, the first time that you're actually asked to log in or sign up is when you've actually already picked what you want. And at this point, it asks you for details like your OTP, your address, and even your slots, so your days of service and when you want to do that. Versus a lot of these events, a lot of this data, like the address, some people might choose to do this way up front as part of onboarding. But what that does is reduces the number of users that make it through. It increases the drop-offs the longer your onboarding flow is. So definitely a great idea doing this.
This is a solid bail, man. Like, this is just insane. As soon as I look at it, like, wow.
Yeah, I think let's look at a little bit of his ingredients as well, his background. Going back into his process, we can see he's got some wireframes here where he's thought through each flow. Great idea using these templates, by the way. I think it definitely makes it much easier to do so. Print out a stack of these and just keep it on your desk. I think a lot of designers prefer to go 100% digital, which is do everything in Figma. But mixing it up like this, I think it's personally a great idea to do so. Even if you're not the best at drawing, I think you should really consider that. These are his wireframes. Overall, I think this looks great. Janil, how do you rate this on the Bhel scale?
On the Bhel scale, this is going to be my highest. I'm going to give him a solid 4.2, just because everything is done. The attention to detail, the design, a little bit of the playfulness with the Solemate, even the logo and everything. I'm just overall impressed. And I think there's still like a few more things, like to get to a solid 5. I would then want to see like everything flushed out, all the use cases taken care of, and maybe like some interactions and some prototype. But to me, this is just outstanding.
Awesome. I pretty much agree with you. I would give this also 4.5. I think this is great. I really love how you've done this. I also see that there's another iteration here. I think we saw the first iteration. So you have worked on a bunch of the feedback here. I would say the thing that I think probably can be improved is, I understand that you're going for a minimalist look with a lot of these cards, the black and white monochrome kind of thing. It does give a bit of a premium feel to use that monochrome, but I just felt that the UIs in some places felt a little raw. I think I would definitely try to make this a little bit more refined, like some of these elements. I think there's definitely better ways you could visualize, but overall I think this is great. I'm looking forward to seeing the case study, and I know that Rachit is planning to extend this case study into a much bigger one, because he is working on an app that also lets you do other stuff related to this. We will also see, in the future, other features within this Solemate brand. But a great job on this, Rachit.
Yeah, and I think then when he gets to like a 5 out of 5, he'll get a free bail.
Yeah. We literally just swiggy it to his house.
like all bails showing up unannounced.
Let's go.
भाई साहब
Around
किसी ने
Bhel.
bail बनाया था. Like imagine when you're sitting with your family and then you're like, somebody knocks on your door and you're like, sir, bail order kiya.
We'll do that. Let's try doing that for some
Yeah.
people.